We got Gators breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
We know we're business, Will. Plenty of business to get into tonight on this episode of Gators Breakdown. We got lots. We got fall camp kind of wrapping up with the last scrimmage. We got progress on DJ Lagway. We're going to hear from the safety duo of Jadan Castell and Bryce Thornton. We'll hear from Jadan Baugh. Everybody, welcome to Gators Breakdown. I'm your host, David Waters, joined by Will Miles. We're going to break it down right here on this episode of Gators Breakdown. A lot to get into. Billy Napier literally spoke at 5:30, so 3 hours ago. So I have a little bit of. He usually speaks at noon on Mondays, but they have an afternoon practice schedule this week, so kind of had to speed up. Had to go pick the daughter up from cheerleading practice, Will, and all that. So scrambling, but we got it done, and there's gonna be a lot to talk about in this episode.
It's not warm enough for Napier at practice early in the morning. Had to make sure it got a little warmer this afternoon. Have the guys out there. Heat acclimation, I guess.
Yeah, there we go.
But I don't know. But hey, we're not quite to business yet, man. That's 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now, all that stuff really starts because, we enjoy this. It's nice that we're starting to get closer to the season. Obviously, everybody's starting to anticipate. But the reality is that talking season has been a lot of fun the last 3 years with Napier and then the seasons. Other than the last 4 games last year, not so much. So it's time to turn that around, man. Let's have the talking season match the results on the field. And the good news is that we're going to find out soon enough. Florida should have a pretty easy shot its first couple of weeks, but obviously a lot of intrigue with some of the injuries in camp and that sort of stuff. And then and then we'll see, man. Rubber meets the road pretty quick. Bunch of road games start the year, and we'll know whether Napier's got it or not pretty early on this year.
For sure. So as you mentioned, kind of talking season, Billy Napier gets into narratives a little bit. So that won't be from the sound that we hear from Billy Napier, but it will be. I do have graphics of that quote to share. It was a good talking point there in the Gators Breakdown Plus Discord just a few moments ago. So we'll get into that, but also what he had to say about fall. The scrimmage and kind of fall camp wrapping up a bit. What they're going to be working on this week before it is game week next week. So lots to get into. So everybody hit that like button, like what we're doing right here on Gators Breakdown. Smash that like button. It really helps us out. Comment. I see some live comments going in there. If you're watching the replay, leave some there as well. Subscribe right here on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. So, all right, let's get into it. And we'll start with Billy Napier, of course, just a few hours ago. And he was asked where this team stacks up coming out of fall camp, as far as game readiness goes, compared to his past teams.
We probably have more players that I think are game ready. Now, I think our team as a whole, coming out of the second scrimmage, we got a pretty good group of ones that we can run out there. I think our focus this week is working on contingency plans. It's working on, the rotational players. We have players that need to grow in the special teams area, so that we can build depth and build roles for more players on the team. And that's ultimately what we're focused on, and then obviously we're changing gears to afternoon practice this week because school starts Thursday. But in general, we have to make a big jump here over the next couple of weeks with that second tier group of players on our team.
Sounded like that second tier got it a bit more work in the scrimmage compared to the one before. How did you see players respond to that opportunity and maybe define potential roles for themselves moving forward?
Yeah, no, I thought there was probably a dozen players that really took a big jump, that showed promise. I thought the intensity of this scrimmage, the effort, the physicality, the pursuit, the strain, the chase, everything was much better than scrimmage one, so I thought overall it was good, and we saw a lot of guys make progress, and I think in position to do more, and I think a lot of them we still need to see more out of.
Billy, keyword their progress. Have you made as much progress this camp as you thought you would at this point in time?
I think at certain positions we have. I think we went into training camp with kind of some assumptions about, where we needed to make work. I think we've seen some of those things come to light. We need to get healthy. I think some of those positional battles that we talked about, I think we have made progress in those areas. Look, this week we'll really refine the special teams depth chart. We'll move toward, okay, hey, based off of where we're at, how will we play the players in the game? Who are the starters? Who are rotational players? How many plays will they play? I think for me, I like where we're at. I think the training camp has been positive. We got to get a few healthy here down the stretch, but in general, it's a greater good game. You got to go to the deep water, and I think we did that. And there's always going to be some casualties that come with that, but I think overall we got out of it pretty healthy, and I feel good about where we're at.
From the standpoint of injuries, is there anything that you think is lingering and could cost games?
We're fortunate that we don't have to report on that until week 3. But you guys are pretty good at figuring those things out. Look, I think this is not atypical of any training camp we've had. We'll see where we're at when we get to next week, and we'll put the players out there that are ready.
There we go, Will, and kind of a shot at the media there, and in some ways, but also commending the media because finding ways to get that injury news, anyways, it coming out there. But certainly I want to go to it, and Will, hopefully it's not something we have to rely on as much this year. But kind of going to his point and what he was kind of hitting home there is, for me, hey, look, these roles don't need to be overlooked. I mean, we know the mash unit Florida had out there at times last year, and part of that mash unit being able to be part of the big upset wins versus LSU and Ole Miss, late in the season, and getting the win over rival Florida State and winning a bowl game. There was a lot of guys who went down with injuries, and it's just part of the game. But it was a kind of abnormal sign for Florida last year with all the guys that missed time, maybe extended a time, half a season, a few games, or even the quarterback, missing it there. So all these roles that we're talking about in this past scrimmage and coming up this week and trying to figure out the guys that are going to contribute. Hey, look, hopefully we don't have to rely on them. Hopefully it's not like last year and those guys have to play an extended amount of time. Well, so it did work out. Eventually, those guys got their chances and they've paid a lot of dividends for those big wins late in the season. But, if we're talking about a team that's going to go make a championship run, if we're talking about a team that's going to go compete for the SEC and all those guys that came back, all the experience that came back, hopefully you don't have to rely on it. But there are going to be times, there are going to be moments where you're still going to find out these battles that they're having this week are going to pay some dividends for Florida.
Well, look, there's a reason why you got all those guys on your roster, right? Otherwise you just have 24, 25 players and go out there. The reality is that every SEC team is going to have some attrition. Now you get worried when it happens in practice before you even get out into the game. But again, there's 2 bye weeks now, which I do think plays to an advantage for teams that might be a little bit depth challenged. I think Florida's got a lot of guys coming back, which means that the backups are in battles, but they're either pushing those starters hard or they're figuring out what does it take to be a starter in this league, and they have good examples to look at. And then you also have to figure that, look, last year we were talking about DJ Douglas and Asa Turner solving all the problems. I saw you tweet that last week, like solving all the problems that we were going to have in the secondary. And then it turned out by week 2, we were like, who are these bums? Get them out of here. Not completely true. But look, Triquez Bridges turned out to be the largest pickup that Florida had through the portal last year, at least on defense. And then you start talking about offense. And I think we all saw that Elijah Badger was going to be pretty good based on his stats at Arizona State. But, I don't think any of us really saw what was coming with Shamir DK. And so, you're going to have your surprises. You're going to have the guys who sort of really who make that leap like Napier was talking about, and then you're just going to need it. Now, Florida's schedule, I do think, is favorable for these sorts of things, to be able to get going sort of soft, where, maybe some guys who are a little bit nicked up get an opportunity to play maybe a little bit, but then, sit out the second half. Maybe you avoid some of those injuries that you get when you go in and you play Miami like week 1, where you got to go full tilt right to start with. And let's be honest, Billy Napier's teams haven't started out real well the last couple of years anyway. So easing into into the season like a grandpa into a bath. Maybe not the worst thing for a Napier for a Napier team. So, yeah, look, I think a lot of things point towards Florida being able to set a great tone to start the year. And Napier's right. Like we haven't had reports of like guys tearing ACLs and non-contact injuries and broken bones and those sorts of things, right? It's been some soft tissue stuff, certainly with Lagway. A few other things that you can see, might be concerned that it might nag somebody all the way throughout the year. But I mean, the most prescient quote in that entire thing is Napier saying we don't have to report on that until week 3. You know what that means? It means you're not playing anybody significant until week 3. And so,
and it's that mandatory SEC thing where LSU week 3, but the SEC's got that new rule where that's when it'll come out because that's when it only has to.
Yeah, well, I mean, so yeah, but that means you got the cupcakes to start with, right?
Yeah.
And so, Florida has an opportunity here. They go out, win one game essentially. If they're ready for that LSU game, they're 3-0, and we're talking about a top 10 squad heading out of 3 games, and maybe even heading into that game, they might end up being a top 10 squad depending upon what Lagway looks like in the first couple of games. So everything sort of sets up for Florida to be successful, but I think a big part of that is you aren't going to have those cupcakes week 3. Week 6, like they have the last couple of years. That the last couple of years they've lost early on in the year and then have had a couple of get right games.
Yeah.
This year they're not going to have any get right game. I mean, maybe Mississippi State you think might be a get right game, but they're not. There's no Furman on the calendar. In November, there's a thing where you've got that ability to like pair a bye week with a cupcake and almost give you guys 2 weeks off. You don't have that, and so you really got to take advantage of the fact that, if you're going to have position battles, if you're going to have guys trying to get them experience before they have to go on the field against an LSU or before they have to go on the field against a Texas, like first 2 games is when you get to it. And so figuring out who the best guys are to do that, I think is where they're probably at in camp at this point.
All right. So, of course, part of that, as you mentioned, DJ Lagway, and Napier did have plenty to say about him as well. And hey, look, I know I heard the feedback. Some people were just tired of talking about the DJ Lagway injury, but of course, can't ignore it. Can't ignore it. Did say after of course, did not take part in the scrimmage on Saturday. Did DJ Lagway, but did take team reps today. 11 on 11 for Lagway in today's practice. Napier said he had a, quote, full stack of throws last week. And even though, he didn't scrimmage, did quite a bit of work that day. Also made sure to point out this was not the first time he's taken 11 on 11 team reps. Quote, he's feeling much better. He's moving around well. And then keeping on with the quarterbacks. Said the battle for the second quarterback spot is still ongoing and that he wishes there was more clarity there, Will. This past, we talked about it yesterday on Gators Breakdown with the Gators Breakdown Plus chat. Aiden Warner kind of seems to be the guy right now, but it does seem like a deck that's shuffling a little bit there behind DJ Lagway. But good news on the injury front for DJ Lagway, doing more and more as we go on. And then does seem like still a competition between Aiden Warner, Harrison Bailey, maybe Tramel Jones as well, the more snaps he gets down the road. But, I mean, we all know it's going to hinge on DJ Lagway as far as how far Florida can go this season. But as we're talking about injuries and stuff, and, you play Long Island, USF, hopefully the backup quarterbacks are in there in those games because Florida's up by some scores. But still, good news on Lagway. And we'll see what ultimately that means in just a couple of weeks before the first game. But doing more and more, and still some questions for that backup spot.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the backup spot is the place where if you're a Florida fan, you're like, oh boy, like given what we've seen. I mean, it's for every team, you're going to have a drop off from that starting spot to the backup spot. But we've seen what the drop off is to the backup spot, at least to the third spot last year, and would rather not see that again. Unless it's somebody with maybe some more potential. I think the Tramel Jones piece is a little bit interesting, but look, I think you're also going to struggle to get through an entire year with your quarterback not being nicked up. And, Florida has had Lagway nicked up the last couple of years, and going into the season, he's nicked up again. And that, like it or not, that's the storyline, right? I mean, The reality is that, Florida has to be prepared. for the guy that's behind Lagway, just in case. And in a college football environment where you can slip up a couple of times, especially if you slip up with Lagway's backup, you just have to not look like garbage. Honestly, if Lagway happens to go out, right? I mean, if you lose by 55 to somebody, okay, well now, was the team ready or was it just the quarterback? As opposed to, if you play one close against a top 10, top 15 team with a backup quarterback, then hey, maybe you're able to continue your way through. But that is maybe the silver lining in all the discussion that we've had about Lagway is these guys have all gotten a lot of reps.
Yeah.
Right. And so the guy who comes in, if something, God forbid, knock on wood, happens to Lagway, the guy who comes in will have had experience with those receivers. And I think, we've poo-pooed, and I think rightly so, the chemistry with different receivers for a guy like Lagway. I think it matters a lot more for a guy that you might term a system quarterback, right? Somebody who doesn't necessarily have transcendent skills is a guy who does need to get those reps with the first team wide receivers or even the second team wide receivers so that they're ready to go when they have to go out on the field. So, look, I'm like, out of all the places, and honestly, this is true with any SEC team, but out of all the places where Florida can't afford an injury, that is probably the most important spot. But again, I think, if you're going to look at the silver lining of sort of the limited reps that Lagway's been getting, that lining is that these other guys have gotten some reps and that Billy Napier and staff should have a clear line of sight to what these guys can and can't do when they put them in a game. If you remember Aiden Warner last year, it felt like they basically ran sort of jet sweeps, little screen passes, and floods, and that was it, right? Yeah. And they hit the flood real early in the first quarter once, and from then on, Texas was ready for it, knew exactly what was coming, and there just wasn't a lot of variety. I suspect there will be a lot more of the playbook open, even if these guys don't necessarily clearly don't have the same ability as DJ Lagway, but there will be more of the playbook open, and in many ways, that's because of all the reps they've gotten this fall.
Yeah, it should go back to the spring as well. they're taking the main reps, and then Aiden Warner as well. Playing with the team last year, as you said, same system. So the only quarterback, besides Lagway that had system reps in live game reps. So look, I think he has taken steps. And could Florida still get by Kentucky, Mississippi State with Aiden Warner with the defense that should be improved? Sure, I think that's certainly a possibility there. I think it's a risk, asking much more than that behind the SEC's worst two teams. So hopefully DJ Lagway's out there coming up in these next few days and heading into game week as the guy. So I think he will be. I think when Long Island comes into the swamp next Saturday, DJ Lagway will be out there and 3-4 drives and we'll see. And get him out.
Hopefully it's 28-0 and he's sitting down.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go on to further on in the press conference. We'll just taking some highlights from it. Napier says, at the cornerback spot, they consider Devin Moore, Dijon Johnson, and Cormani McClain. All three of those guys as starter. He was asked more about Cormani, and he replied, quote, "Cormani has improved as a tackler." That's how he starts it. Cormani has improved as a tackler. I know a lot of people have come at me and said, he's got to be much better tackler before I have belief in that. Look, I know we still have to see it. Talked about this last night on the episode as well. But, that's what Billy Napier leads with. Cormani has improved as a tackler. I think he's had a great offseason. He's gained probably 15 pounds of lean muscle. He's bigger. He's stronger. He's much more disciplined. He's been much more consistent as a teammate, much more accountable. I think he's grown up quite a bit. I think he understands his level of loyalty and accountability to the team. He wants to be a guy that people can trust. He needs to continue to work on his communication, and I think he's very much a player that continues to evolve. But he's a good cover corner, Napier said. He can play outside. He can match up. He's got height, length, speed, ball skills. He's got ball judgment, and he's improved his attack. So we need Cormani to continue to improve, and there's a huge runway for him to continue to get better. I don't want to make too much of images and all that kind of stuff, but, you can see it. Cormani McClain is there. He does look bigger, stronger from what we can take from images there. But with all the reps he got in spring, DD's been banged up a little bit this fall as well, so even more reps as that cornerback two opposite of Devin Moore. Certainly encouraging that we hear. Napier hasn't been shy about the truth of Cormani McClain. Going back to last offseason and a year ago, and now talking him up quite a bit here. I mean, it seems a lot of the talk about Cormani has been truthful, I think, in a lot of what Billy Napier has said so far. So good. It's not just him. Teammates have been propping him up as well all this fall camp. Would be big news for Florida if doesn't matter who's cornerback 1, cornerback 2, cornerback 3 between those 3 guys. You can count on all of them.
Well, I mean, look, there's a reason why Cormani McClain was a high level 5-star recruit. It's because he had the tools, right? And then it was just a question of could he put it together. And we've seen flashes. I mean, he had the pick 6 against Kentucky last year, and he's got that kind of ability. The problem is as a corner, you got to come with it every play, right? Like you got to be ready, and especially in the SEC, you're going to be taking on some of the best athletes in the world out there on the outside. Now,
those coaches are not shy about calling run plays towards your way if they know you can't tackle.
They are not. And I mean, look, if you could be a shutdown corner like Deion Sanders, you can maybe shy away from tackling a little bit.
Right.
But you got to be that good on the outside in order to do that. Now, I think Florida specifically, there isn't a whole lot behind Devin Moore, Dijon Johnson, Cormani McClain. I mean, you got Michael Caraway coming in as a transfer. You got guys like Teddy Foster. You got some freshmen in there as well. But the reality is you're going to go out there and you're going to face a lot of 4 wide sets. Like it's not like everybody runs 11 and 12 personnel out there like Florida does, right? You end up with a lot of 4 and 5 wide sets. You're going to have a bunch of corners out there. And those corners are going to have to tackle because if they can't, then you're going to get run over. And we've seen that before the last few years. Florida, the Kentucky game a couple of years ago really comes to mind in terms of where Kentucky specifically realized that Florida's corners weren't going to tackle and attacked them like crazy. In that
Jalen Kimber, there we go. That's the name. Oh,
there you go. In that particular game. So, look, I think it's interesting that everybody focuses in on the shortcomings of McClain, because I think the shortcomings of McClain over the past couple of years have been tied to he has the ability, if only, right? And it's like you want to see that potential play itself out on the field. But you can say the same thing about Devin Moore, right? I mean, if only he could stay on the field. He's been one of the best players that Florida's had on defense the last couple of years, but he just hasn't been on the field that much. And so, you think about like the different things that these guys are all bringing to the fore. I think they each have different strengths, each have different weaknesses, and they're just sort of the ability to have that potential play out on the field is going to be tied to a lot of different things, probably different things for each of them. But when you look at the entire cornerback room, I think Moore and Johnson were guys who on the field have proven it but need to stay healthy, and then you got McClain, who has struggled to prove it on the field, at least consistently, but is a guy who has an awful lot of upside. And then, guys like Michael Caraway, those are guys who have spent significant amounts of time on the field and are there to back up these guys, hopefully to back up these guys as sort of like a baseline expectation of what you're going to get from a preparation perspective week in, week out. So, I think just like every year in college football, there are some places where you sit there and go, a lot of stuff has to go right here for everything to look perfect. I've talked a lot this offseason about Florida having front loaded its difficult road games. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a position where that matters, right? That if you have a guy like a McClain or a Johnson or a Moore go out, 5, 6, 7 years into the year, and not necessarily out for the entire season, just out for a couple of games. The nice part is that you'll be playing in the swamp when these young guys get an opportunity to come in. If you think about it last year, right, the defense really improved right around that LSU game. And I mean, it improved sort of from week 4 on, but but realistically, the point where sort of the offense and the defense all gelled together was that LSU
also take
game.
into account, and take into account the opposing offenses they were playing.
Sure. Yeah. But I mean, with as much run that everybody other than me has given Garrett Nussmeier, we've got to give a lot of credit to Florida's defense for shutting him down. They made a guy who got drafted by the New York Giants in the first round cry multiple times after he threw interceptions there to hit in the game. So, look, I think guys like Dijon Johnson showed out in that game. We're going to talk about safeties. Guys like Bryce Thornton showed out in that Ole Miss game, right? So the ability to do that is there. And I guess what I'm saying is that part of the reason that I think we saw that is that those guys were able to do that on their home field when guys went down with injuries. And Florida should have a similar aspect. I mean, really the only real road game of significant challenge in that second half of the season is the game at Ole Miss, right? So Hopefully Florida's sitting there, 7-1, 8-0, or whatever, however many games in they are by the time they play Ole Miss, and even a slip up on the road won't matter. But I think that does make a difference when you start talking about areas where you lack a little bit of depth. And so McLean's important because Florida doesn't have a ton of depth at this position if he flames out, right? And so having him take a step forward is a big deal.
All right. As far as kind of positions go, Napier spoke a good bit on Miles Graham in this press conference. I'll get into that more later on this week when I feature linebackers a bit more with Miles Graham and Jaden Robinson. Also discuss wide receivers, and I'll say that for later on this week too. But did say they'll evaluate who's healthy and who's ready at that spot because we know Dallas Wilson, Trey Wilson, been limited lately. Aiden Mizell just coming back as well into the fold this fall camp. So a lot of shuffling going on because of the injuries, minor injuries that have happened there at the wide receiver spot. But we'll hit that later on this week. So interesting discussion point here, Will. Kind of the outside narrative shaping things. Billy Napier went kind of deep into that. I wanted to share that because it's pretty interesting comments here. Like I said, good discussion points. And so Billy Napier was asked, do you have to fight the urge to ease up at this point when you got a good team, they get to this point, they put in all the work to start worrying about getting them all to the starting line healthy? And Napier responded, I think that we adapt the way we format the practices as we move towards the season. But the work is the work. Look, I don't think we can buy into any narrative about this team. This team has got to going to have the opportunity to define themselves. So being ranked, people telling you got a good team, you're capable, to me, that's an insult. They tell you that. They might be, they're capable, they're scary. Well, to me, that's an insult. So we're going to get to the side with how we play. So I think ultimately that's what we have to prepare, and then we'll get to go play, and we will decide. And I think that's what our focus is on. So then with the follow-up, if that's an insult, what's a compliment before you play the game? Yeah, we're not going to connect any outside opinion to our confidence or how we prepare, Napier said, or others' opinions. We're not connecting our confidence to that, for sure. Okay? We have to get consumed with improving in our process and being our best, each player bringing their best so we can be our best. And if everyone continues to improve, and I'm talking about the staff as much as players, that's all you can worry about. And at the end of the day, see what the score is. So, of course, that's kind of taken a life of its own since the press conference. And some of the fan base is really liking the response there from Billy Napier. Hey, look, it's true. And for me, for the player aspect side of this, Will, is, look, you did taste success at the end of last year. You know what it tastes like now. You know what it takes to go compete against some, the top tier of the SEC a bit more. But here's the thing. It was only a little bit. You haven't accomplished anything yet. I mean, this is the first time there has been some good feeling coming into a season, coming out of a season for Florida. We all remember the November collapses of year one and year two under Billy Napier. Well, this was the complete opposite of that. And there's some good feelings in the program. But look, they haven't accomplished anything yet. This team, these players have lost a lot more games than they've won since they've been on this field for Florida. So there should be this, hey, we're not satisfied with what happened at the end of last year. We don't care that now people will finally rank us. There's still a lot for us to prove. And kind of going to your point earlier, Will, it is talking season. We've heard a lot of this kind of similar talk a little bit, like nobody knows what I know about this team. I remember Napier saying that a year ago or whatever. So there is a little bit of talking season, but at the same time, I think there does have to be a message sent to players, to staff, that there is some roses being thrown our way right now. But we have to remember. We have to remember what it felt like against Miami, what it felt like against Texas A&M, these heartbreakers against Tennessee and Georgia. That's the next step. That is the next step. And it's not just going to automatically happen because you had a nice November and bowl game to end last year.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. One is it would have been a lot shorter for you to read, especially if Napier just said rat poison, because that's pretty much what he said there.
Pretty
Is
much.
he
Pretty
got up
much.
there and just said rat poison. Like, we're not gonna ingest that stuff. And certainly that's one of the places he comes from. And so he talked a lot about process. He talked a lot about doing what you can do and controlling what you can control and looking up at the scoreboard. That comes directly from Coach Saban's playbook, and so not a complete surprise to hear that from him. I think the thing is like it's not really that much rat poison. I mean, basically the media is saying you're not going to suck this year. Like they're picking them like somewhere between 13th and 20th overall when you look at like the initial polls for the season. And that's like Wisconsin. Wisconsin ends up somewhere between 13th and 20th. Iowa, who hasn't had a quarterback since 1908, they pick them somewhere between 13th and 20th. Like Texas A&M, go 8-4 and finish 23rd every year, right? Like Miami, because they stay in the ACC, usually ends up in that 13th to 20th range. Like it's nice. Like that's a nice season to end up between 13th and 20th. But that ain't good enough for the University of Florida. And certainly with what Napier was saying a couple of weeks ago about practicing like you're trying to go for a championship and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I guess, you're talking about tasting success last year in 4 games and everybody's talking you up and all that sort of stuff. I mean, not really. They're still saying you get just butt kicked by Texas, Georgia, and somebody else. Like if they're picking you at 13th, like they expect you to have at least 3 losses. And so, I struggle with if the team struggles
Josh
to get
Payton
motivated.
did pick him in the playoff today. Or
Well,
yesterday.
there you go. I mean, hell, I have them in the playoff too, but I have 9-3, right? No one's picking them to go 12-0.
Yeah.
Right. No one's picking them to even go 11-1. I think most of us see 10-2 to 8-4.
Well, even if you are picking Florida for the playoff, you're not picking them to go to Atlanta. Nobody's picking them to go to Atlanta.
Well, there you go, right? So, I mean, it's like, hey, you're a good team. You're not a great one. It's like, you're not going to suck. You're not going to be Vanderbilt, right? You're not going to be Kentucky. Like, we'll be able to actually pencil you in with no one will bet in the Vanderbilt game because you'll be I know we don't play Vanderbilt, but still, you know what I mean, right? Like yes. The lines when in Florida's heyday, when they played Vandy or when they played Kentucky, it was like a 45-point spread, or they just didn't have one on the board because it was so ridiculous. No one would bet, right? Like those sorts of things, like, when you get back to that, now you can start talking to me about rat poison expectations. I mean, literally, basically, the question right now in the media is, well, if you had to pick somebody, would it be Florida or South Carolina? Mm-hmm. Come on, South Carolina, that's who you're being compared to. So, look, and it's funny because the exact polar opposite is the one that I keep railing against, which is I think LSU is just going to completely faceplant this year. I think they're going to be 1-2 coming out of that game in Baton Rouge against Florida. And the overwhelming just benefit of the doubt that they're giving a team with a limited quarterback and 4 new offensive linemen is just mind-boggling to me when I look at what their season is to start with. So, it goes both ways, right? I mean, I'd be much more concerned about the rat poison if I was in Baton Rouge than I am in Gainesville. Like in Gainesville, it's like, hey, you guys are like 15th. You still got something to prove. In Baton Rouge, like, hey, you guys are a top 5 team, even though you got to replace half your roster. And, so anyway, we'll see. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe LSU will go flying through everything. But I don't know. I'm put it this way. My DraftKings account suggests that I really, really, really don't have confidence in LSU.
I mean, but like going to Napier's point, it is different this year. This is a different set of expectations, a different set of messaging that is different out there about Florida than it has been. But certainly, I think this thing, hey, you've got your teeth kicked in way too much the last few years. I don't care if people were picking Florida to go be number 1. Anyway, you haven't proven anything yet, and that's what. And we all want to see it.
I mean, we were literally a win against LSU or a loss against LSU away from running the guy out of town with pitchforks, right? So it's like we're like just right teeter on the edge last year. And certainly the hope of Lagway and the streak at the end makes us feel a lot more sanguine about this year. But when I said I have an entire article in our preseason magazine that just says the Billy Napier conundrum. I understand why people are sitting on the fence going, I see all the talent on this team. I see the talent at the quarterback position. I see all the returning guys, and I just don't trust that guy in a big game to get me over the hump and get us to a place where we're going to have an edge Because look, I mean, you watch any team that wins a championship, and there's a game where they don't deserve to win, and they find a way to win, either because the quarterback does something goofy or because the coach does something that gives this team an edge, or you get a wonky turnover from some sort of defensive play call that just completely throws the opposing quarterback for a loop. Like there's always something. Like you think about like even the Saban teams early on in the Alabama era with like Terrence Cody blocking a field goal against a clearly inferior Tennessee team, right? So those sorts of things have to happen in seasons where you're going to have a magical run. And I think that's really sort of like, honestly, the question I have is, for all of the talk of scared money don't make money and that sort of stuff as an attitude, the question I have coming into this year is, now that you got your horses, now that you've got the guys you want in position to do that sort of stuff, are you actually going to live up to that moniker? Are you going to go out there and find your team edges by going for it on fourth down, by being a little bit unconventional, by, if you're going to run out of the pistol 80% of the time, well, now all of a sudden we got to take a couple of shots on third and short or fourth and short out of that position to make sure that teams can't just absolutely sell out for those sorts of things. And so that's, to me, the key question here isn't necessarily the attitude of the players. It's the attitude of the coaches. Do the coaches have confidence in those guys that they've recruited, that they've developed, and that they've put in position? Do they now come out game one fully confident that these guys are a championship team? I think if Napier goes out aggressive and really, I've been calling for 3 years, my favorite game that Billy Napier coached was a loss. It was a game against Tennessee in his first year where he just basically let Anthony Richardson go crazy. And every fourth down, they were going for it and they were chucking the ball all over the place. And Richardson wound up with like 400 yards passing at the end of the game. And the game was close. I mean, they got an onside kick at the end and almost came back. But everything he did in that game gave Florida an edge to make that way closer than it should have been. And the question I have really for all of this stuff is, there's an attitude for the players and they have to go. I mean, when the ball's rolled out on the field, they got to be ready to go. But are the coaches going to be ready to go too? Are the coaches going to say, we've prepared you guys and we're going to put full confidence in you as well because we think you're a championship team and we think that if we give you the freedom to be aggressive and the freedom to go take those chances and to get those edges, that you're going to get it for us. And that's to me a big part of what we're going to find out, especially September 13th when they go to Baton Rouge.
Well said, Will. Like that. That was almost like that was like a locker room speech right there.
Hey, time to go, man. We only got a week and a half left.
There we go. All right, that was it for Billy Napier today. Like I said, I'll get into more what he had to say, kind of for linebackers and receivers later on this week. But that was kind of the highlights from what he had to say. Next week it'll be a game week press conference on Monday. So there we go.
Oh my God, it's almost Christmas, buddy. It's almost Christmas.
Almost there.
Before we go, gotta go watch the Long Island game on Jefferson Pilot or whatever channel it's on.
Yep. Plus streaming. SEC Network Plus, ESPN Plus. That'd be the only one. All right, let's go to safeties. And we were trying to get into it last week, but there was a lot of stuff with the commitment of Davion Gross and stuff, so we never got around to it. So we are going to hear from Jordan Castell and Bryce Thornton, their relationship and all that good stuff. We're going to dive into the safeties right here, and let's start with Jordan Castell.
What gives you confidence that this team is ready to take the next step and return to kind of the elite status that this program used to be?
I say just like the way we handle practice, from the meetings to the weight room, just little things like that.
What's different? What do you think?
I say the energy. I say we was younger. Guys are older now. We have dudes in, each room that have a lot of experience. So, just like taking on the little things and it's just way more energy in the building. What
kind of confidence do you have with the two of you and all the games you've played together and how well you know each other?
I feel like me and Bryce, I feel like, we the best. I feel like we had one of the best secondaries, best D-line, just as, as a whole unit. We grew up together, we've seen a lot, since our time being here. We lost, we won, so really just experience playing together. And we have a good connection on the field and off the field.
Talk about, obviously, making plays. Last year there was an uptick in interceptions. Any goals this year in regards to that for the secondary and stuff? And how do you guys, build off what you guys did last year there?
We want to make as much plays as we can. We're not going to force any plays, but, you know, when the ball's in the air, we want the ball every time. Like, that's in the team room. Like, you know, the whole defense know we punching, we taking shots at the ball. Like, we need to have more turnovers and just make plays on the ball. For myself, just taking on blocks, you know, just doing whatever just to help the team win.
Technique standpoint, I mean, you started 20+ games here.
Yeah.
So what's the next step for you?
Nah, really, it's a standard to our room. I feel like, you know, last year I ain't make enough plays. I left a lot of plays out there. But really just like setting the standard, you know, holding that standard for the young guys and just, you know, just keep this thing rolling. I got way stronger, faster, and I say this offseason it was more just like taking on that leadership role. I'm not a guy who likes to talk a lot, so really just, you know, I try to say a little joke every now and then, you know, get them boys going, but really just taking on that leadership role and just getting stronger and faster, but that leadership role was the main one.
How did you take that on? How did you come out of your shell more?
Really just talking, like, you know, pulling guys to the side, just, hey, do this and do that. But I'm still working on the, you know, in front of the whole team, but that's still gonna take a little minute.
You got a ton of experience, obviously, but you know, you're still a pretty young guy. Do you feel like, given your experience, that you've stepped into more of a leadership role within this defense this year?
Oh yeah, I am, but I feel like I'm still, you know, I'm still young. I'm holding on to it, but I'm still holding on to it. But I'm learning a lot though, and just being able to like have different coaches like each year and just taking everything on like what they're telling me and just adding it in my toolbox is something, you know, I'm very grateful for.
What do you
I've been excited, kind of motivated by how fast Aaron has been able to come back and play.
Aaron, he helps out with a lot. Somebody who loves football and you know, he has a lot of passion for it as well. You know, he just makes us all compete. You know, I look at it as like, you know, jobs are still on the line. Like, this is what fall camp is for. So, you know, he just helps us go harder.
There's Jordan Castell. And now let's hear from Bryce Thornton.
Jordan was telling me you guys' relationship. How would you just kind of describe it, and how does that show up on the field?
You know, me and Jordan came in together and didn't really know him when we first got here, but, you know, both as a freshman trying to play in the SEC, we got real close. Used to hang out all day. We always used to go to the playbook. That's really the big thing with me and Jordan, and you see how it is today.
Yeah, well, what just the experiences that you guys went through? I mean, some tough moments, but also some great ones down the stretch last year, particularly Ole Miss in your case. Yeah. What has that journey kind of been like?
You know, it's been a bumpy ride, you know, especially with me and Jordan now. It's like I don't have to communicate as much with him. Like, we kind of like know each other. So like all the experience built up, especially with the DB group now, it's great.
How do you feel to be back out there in camp? You're limited in the spring. They're holding you back a little bit.
Nah, it's great to play football. You know, that's what I came here for.
What do you think of the potential of this defense, all the starters you guys got back?
Oh, no, I love this defense. You know, the D-line, they mean, you know, got smart linebackers, a secondary that actually all communicate and all on one page. So it's great when you see the defense flying around.
How much chemistry do you guys have on that back end, just between you and Jordan, both of the stars, and then obviously you guys got corners that have been here a while too?
Like, the communication, like the chemistry is perfect because it's like everybody know what they're supposed to do. It's like most of our third year in this defense, so it's like everybody has experience. All of them played for Roberts, just Nate. We all just come together as one.
You seen from Gonza in training camp coming off the spring, just how much of a jump he's made?
No, it's good. You know, I recruited Laganza, so I know a little bit about him. But it's great to see him be out there. You know, I know a lot about him, so it's just like watching him progress from spring to now. You know, I love to watch it.
So when you say you recruited him, how much? How hard were you on him?
Now, hard, cause, you know, he was with Tennessee, so I tried to get him to flip, and he eventually came here. You know, I was his host, so I was just telling him all the good things about Florida, and I'm just glad to hear.
What was your big pitch to him?
Just about how the secondary, how we turn the ball over, how Florida's DBU, how we gonna make that the thing.
And then he's playing star and safety. You've done that.
Yeah.
How hard is that to do, especially as a freshman?
Now, it's difficult, but that's why you come here. Like, you got to accept the challenge because you never know what will happen. My first game here, I was at practicing week safety. Then they put me at start mid-game. So it's just like you never know. If you really want to love football, your opportunity going to come.
What about Drake? I mean, what has stood out to him, to you about him?
Oh, Drake.
Yeah.
Oh, he loves football. You can tell that. That's his main goal. He always in the building. We're always working, always trying to find little things, but you can tell he loves the game.
What does Drake need to do to take the next step in his game? Drake.
Only thing I would say is you get in the playbook because when he play fast, like he's a dangerous guy. So I just want to say he should keep getting in the playbook and he learn what he's supposed to do. He's gonna be a great player.
Speaking of playing fast, Billy's talked about Aaron Gates and just how instinctual he is and how hard he works. How cool has it been to see him back out there after this quick after his injury?
Nah, it's great because, AG last year, he did a lot for us. So just having him and having that guy that can do so much for the team is amazing.
Is there a place in the secondary you think he can play? He can play corner probably.
Nah, he can play it all. He's a versatile guy. Safety, star, corner, and AG, he's the one-and-ones.
He's got like a different edge to him, doesn't he?
Nah, he does. Y'all seen it last year when he turned it on.
There we go, Will. And you kind of heard those two guys really just mention playing together, experience, chemistry, communication, and certainly got to go a long way for improvement, I think, on that back end. And that whole secondary. I mean, every bit of you're not having a new face in that secondary this year. You have the two safeties, Castell and Thornton, coming along. Your corners are coming along with Moore and Aditi and Cormani. We just talked about those guys. You guys at nickel, star, Denson, and Gates, and they said Gates can play safety as well. I mean, not just for these two guys that we heard about. There's a lot of chemistry, a lot of experience that all guys played together that are coming back. And that's one reason we're so excited about this defense, kind of building off what we saw in November last year and, compared with the guys up front that we expect to be, major stars in Tyreek Satt and Caleb Banks to help those guys. But certainly, that you heard them just really hit home the point of the experience and the experience of playing together.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously experience doesn't just dictate that you're going to be good. The thing is when you look at those two guys specifically, when you talk about Thornton and you talk about Castell, those are guys who were good last year in that stretch that we're talking about. The LSU game specifically, both of those guys played 93 snaps in that game. 71.4 PFF ranking for Thornton, 73.9 for Castell. The Ole Miss game, Castell's a little bit worse, but played 79 snaps. Thornton plays 78 and had a rating of 71.3. Then you go to Florida State. Thornton plays 61 snaps, 77.6. Castell plays 26 snaps, 70.8. So he wasn't playing quite as much towards the end of the year. But again, I go to the fact that if you start looking at the games where Florida's defense played well, these guys were guys who stepped up. And if you look in games where they didn't play very well, Texas, Thornton, 27 snaps, 39.4 PFF ranking. You look at Texas for Castell, 45.7 PFF ranking on 52 snaps. So when Florida's defense struggled, these guys struggled. When Florida's defense played well and gave the defensive line time to be able to get to the quarterback. Now, look, those are symbiotic things, right? Getting in there and knocking down the quarterback makes the safeties look better. But vice versa, actually making like when you've got coverage busts, it never gives guys the opportunity to get there. And I think one of the things that maybe goes overlooked with last year's defense specifically is, if you think about 2 or 3 years ago, how many times did we see a guy just run wide open down the field?
Yeah.
And they'd hit the receiver would get hit. Tennessee is one where I specifically think of, where Florida came down, worked really, really hard to score a touchdown to tie the game or get within 3. And then Tennessee hits, I'm thinking Hendon Hooker hits his tight end, and Florida just didn't guard the tight end. And the guy goes 80 yards, and all of a sudden Tennessee's down at the 1 again and punches it in. And then that game turns into a little bit of a laugher. That didn't happen last year. There weren't, do you remember any plays last year where there was just a complete bust that turned into a big play? Maybe in the Miami game early.
I'll throw it up. I threw the graphic up, explosive passing plays, and just broken into 20-plus yards, 30-plus yards, or 40-plus yards. And they were more there earlier in the season. You go to the Cam Ward and against Miami, there were 10 plays of at least 20-plus yards of passing. Not only 3 30-plus yard passing plays, and then 1 40-plus yard passing play. So yeah, you had a 40-yard play, against Cam Ward, a 40-yard plus play against Marcel Reed. But then you did see that besides the Texas game, you did see that, that come down from the 30-yard explosive passing play or the 40-yard explosive passing play. So, yeah, it was certainly more something that happened earlier in the year when it was the entire defense. I mean, you talked about it being symbiotic. I mean, Caleb Banks, Tyreek Hill, we didn't hear from those guys earlier in the year. You know, they weren't pressuring Cam Ward and Marcel Reed like they were pressuring Nussmeier and Jackson Dart later in the year. It was symbiotic, and the entire defense played much better. But, yeah, you get to the example here. You know, Cam Ward, Marcel Reed, and his first ever start, of course, you know, lighting up Florida a good bit. But, like I said, besides, you know, Quinn Ewers hitting 2 30-plus yard passing plays and 2 40-plus yard passing plays, they really did limit those down the stretch. And you can look at Garrett Nussmeier and Jackson Dart. Both those guys had over 40 attempts in those games. Nussmeier, Will, I know you're going to love that one. No 30-plus yard passing plays against Florida, which means he also didn't have any 40-plus yard passing plays. He had 4 of at least 20 yards. Then Jackson Dart hit 6 20-plus yards passing plays, 2 30 and 1 40. But, you know, Florida's defense just held strong there. And then you got the fortunate benefit of playing Luke Krummenhoek and Ty Thompson there against FSU and Tulane. But certainly, you know, with Nussmeier and Dart, you know, it could have easily went the way of Cam Ward and Marshall Reed at the beginning of the year. But it was a group, you know, with the safety, the secondary that played much better. If you take it through the whole year, and this was what Florida was ranked the whole year, and giving up passing plays of at least 20 yards, Florida was 126 in the country, Will. So not great, but kind of going to that bend, don't break style that we were talking about. Better in the passing plays of at least 30 yards, you know, 65th there. But after that rough start, you know, there were two plays. Cam Ward, Marcel Reed had one apiece. Florida, as you kind of go to it, the explosive plays, the big play, Florida was 22nd. There was only, you look at 40-plus yard passing plays, Florida was 22nd in the country in that regard. So giving up a ton of, you know, in that range of, you know, anywhere from 20 to 30, but was much better in the explosive play route given the other ones.
Well, and I take back what I said about Florida not having a bunch of breakdowns, because that Texas game, there were a bunch of breakdowns in that one, and in fact, sort of a quick throw over the middle to a tight end with nobody guarding him, and he went all the way down for a touchdown real early, and that one sort of set the tone. So what I would say is that I think what this sort of suggests is that teams that had elite type speed, or at least commensurate speed or comparable speed to Florida, were able to exploit the defense, especially early on in the year. Now, Texas, I think, had speed that Florida hadn't quite seen yet, and certainly a physicality that Florida hadn't seen yet. But
and some great play calls.
Well, that too. But I mean, when you look at LSU, I think one of the things that you see there, and this really comes out when you see the tape, is that, I mean, one of the things Nussmeier did very well in that game was he converted 3rd and 4th downs in a way that was really frustrating to anybody who was there. And Max and I were there for that one live. It was definitely really frustrating. But what you see when you go back and rewatch the tape is that there were opportunities for Florida to get LSU defenders on the ground, or offensive players on the ground, and they weren't able to do it. And that was in many ways why LSU was able to extend the play and have 93 offensive plays in that game. But I think, to the point that Thornton made in the clip that you showed, the key is not just knowing your playbook, it's knowing your playbook well enough to play fast. And part of the, you started this whole section with the safeties, or really the defensive backs, talking about Devin Moore's had plenty of playing time, that these guys, Castell and Thornton, have gotten a bunch of playing time. That really, when you look at it overall, that Sharif Denson's gotten a bunch of playing time, that Aaron Gates has gotten a bunch of playing time, that Dijon Johnson, even last year, now has gotten a ton of playing time, that these guys all now have had an offseason to look at their playbooks, to learn their playbooks, and to learn how to play fast. And so that's going to be the question that I have, is that 122 number, 126, whatever it is on the 20-plus yard plays. That one, I think, comes down, even if they still continue to play sort of a bend but don't break, cover 2, cover 4, middle of the field open type defense. Like, they're doing that in many ways to allow their linebackers time, the ability to roam, to allow their defensive line the ability to take things over, and to protect the safeties given that, they'll have consistent assignments the whole way across the board. And look, I mean, Tampa 2 was something where when you had superior athletes, those Tony Dungy teams in Tampa, when you had superior athletes, you were able to play a pretty simple defensive system and win because your team played fast. And it turns out when you got Derek Brooks, you can do a lot of stuff on defense, and the scheme doesn't really matter if your guys win individual battles. And so, one of the nice parts about what Florida has coming back this year in the defensive backfield, and quite honestly, you can say this on the defensive line as well, is the guys who are coming back should all be able to play fast because they're now experienced SEC players who know the playbook, know what the offense is trying to do, know how to do film study throughout the week so they can understand what emotion, what the offense is trying to do when they're putting a tight end or a wide receiver in motion or those sorts of things. Like, you're not going to get your guys out of position. And, 2-3 years ago, I remember writing an article where basically I looked at the defense and said, you know what it looks like? It looks like nobody trusts anybody to do their job, right? That everybody's kind of like hedging just in case that guy doesn't realize that motion is meant to get us out of position. And it's like, oh crap, he didn't realize it. I better drop deep in order to make sure that we don't give up a big play. And then lo and behold, the ball ends up in a giant hole in the zone in between those two guys because neither one of them is really trusting the other one to do his job. And I think one of the things we saw in the second half of last year was a simplification of the rules and the responsibilities for all of the guys in the secondary specifically. And I think that freed them up to play a little bit faster. I think they'll be able to be a little bit more multiple this year.
Yeah.
And I think Ron Roberts probably going to be a little bit more aggressive than he was last year as well with the blitz and trusting some of these guys. But it goes back to the rant I had earlier, which is you now have experienced guys who should know the playbook, who should be able to play fast. Do you trust them? Do you trust them to go out there and give you an edge by rotating them right as the snap comes, by exposing them maybe a little bit, by taking a chance with a blitz? Like, all of those things are going to be questions that we're going to learn real early on in the year in terms of what Ron Roberts really thinks he has on the backside. Because it turns out last year he spent a lot of time making sure none of these guys got isolated one-on-one. And the question will be, does he feel much more comfortable with these guys isolating him one-on-one this year, or do they still have to drop off into that zone? I think they'll still play quite a bit of zone, but the question then is, do those zones, do they get smaller, right? Those zones shrink when those guys go faster. And more importantly, on 3rd and 7, the ball gets dropped off and everybody flows to the ball and you tackle the guy 3 yards short of the first down, and all of a sudden your opponent has to punt. That is a win for the defense. You miss that tackle, the guy stumbles ahead for a couple extra yards to first down. Not only do you get tired, but now you're on the field for 93 plays, and DJ Lagway sitting over on the sidelines and can't pour it on. So I'm really curious to see, like, from a schematic perspective, if Florida's blitzing a ton, that says a lot about how much confidence Ron Roberts has in the back end of this defense. So I'm really curious to see what happens to that blitz rate as the season moves on.
There we go. But yeah, a lot of these guys play together. So that's just, I think, going to go a long way for this defense. Kind of as you said, Will, what can they build upon that they all learned last year to, I think, enhance defense, things that we didn't see last year on defense that they can kind of unveil now because getting into the playbook more and trusting each other more. That goes for players and staff, all the trust that goes along there. So Napier did say in the press conference today as well, Michael Caraway Jr. and Lagonza Hayward have emerged, and that they'll need them, that they've been available and have taken advantage of their reps. Quote, they flash, but we want more consistency. So he says, that they feel good about Thornton and Castell and Gates and Denson as far as the 4 safeties and nickel star spots. But Lagonza Hayward, Michael Caraway Jr., Billy Napier made sure to point out today as well. So, all right here, we're going to end the episode here. Let's go to the offense, and let's hear from number 13 at running back 1, Jadan Baugh.
So strongest pound-for-pound player ever with Billy Napier?
Yeah, a little bit.
How much pride do you take in that? And where's are you just country strong, or how hard do you work at this?
I mean, we work a lot. Coach Miles, he be on my head a lot because sometimes I can stay away in the weight room sometimes, playing around, getting the guys, routed up. But Coach Miles be on my head a lot is into getting stronger, putting the right things in my body so I can, continue to get stronger and, produce on the field.
But just in terms of, are you prideful about holding those records?
I mean, yeah, but it's just, another day for me. You know, I ain't too much, you know, looking at it as, you know, a lot of accomplishment because I got a lot of things I want to do. So,
What are some of your personal goals this season? A lot of things you want to do.
Some of the personal goals, you know, become a better, you know, leader. Become a better leader because, like I told the guys the other day, I don't feel like I'm a great leader, but I feel like I'm an okay leader right now because, you know, I'm still growing, and we all are. So that's my main goal, becoming a better leader.
And so Billy talks about your wiggle for a guy your size.
Yeah.
Yeah, what has that always been? I mean, obviously that's natural, but
Yeah.
do you think that kind of separates you for being a big back that also has a little bit of loose hips?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because when I was younger, I always, like, prided myself on, you know, shaking. You know, my dad, he helped me a lot as into seeing the field a lot more and being able to make moves in the open field. And I feel like that helped me a lot.
You know, you had a great year last year, but you could probably make the case that you're still scratching the surface of how good you think you could be. Just how much better do you think that you could be this year and moving forward in your career?
It's going to be about more of the guys in my room pushing me to become, you know, a better player. I feel like I got a lot of things to work on as into, you know, pass pro, footwork, you know, being a better runner, open my eyes a lot more to see what's on the field because, you know, the game's fast. And coming from high school and coming to college is like kind of hard. But I feel like the guys in my room are going to push me, and they're pushing me every day to become a better player.
Coach Luke said back in spring, and don't take this the wrong way, that part of the next step for you was falling in love with the game a little bit more. What do you think he meant by that, and what goes into that in your opinion?
As a process, me and Coach Luke talk about it a lot, as into understanding what can I do for my body to become 100% the next day. Coming in early, you know, stretching, getting in a cold tub, doing the right things for my body to, you know, put me over the top. And we talk about it a lot, so that's one of the things I can say.
You and Jacoby kind of late in the season got used to kind of splitting the carries. How do you envision that this year, and what kind of advantages or disadvantages does that provide in terms of?
I honestly feel like it does not, you know, have a disadvantage at all because me and Jacoby, you know, we look at it as whoever's in the game, we're going to do the job, and whoever's behind coming in afterwards, they're going to do the job, and I feel like that's a mentality in our room. But becoming, you know, a lot better. Me and Jacoby got close, like very close, as into, you know, being able to just be on the sideline. We rock paper scissors shoot sometimes to see who's going to get in. So, you know, it just like I think that brings us a lot closer.
Will playing some rock, paper, scissors on the sideline and say who's going to get the next carries. Hey, look, you got some trust in your teammate and coaching staff. You probably no issue there with Jadan Baugh and Jacoby Jackson. Trying to find someone who's going to get out there on the field. But, hey, I mean, you look at these two guys, there's not a lot of separation from them, Will. Big fans of what they both can do on the field. It probably gets overlooked. And, Will, I don't know if you have the PFF grades in front of you, but just looking at some stuff, I mean, I think a lot of people probably don't realize Jacoby Jackson actually had a higher yard per carry average than Jadan Baugh. He was at 5.4. Jadan Baugh at 5.1. Look, that's splitting hairs here. The question becomes, I think how even do the carries get? Last year you had Jadan Baugh leading the team at 133. That was in 13 games. Montrell Johnson had 100 in 10 games. In the same amount of games as Baugh, Jacoby Jackson, 13 games, he had 95 carries compared to Jadan Baugh's 133. So look, history shows under Billy Napier, the top two are going to have pretty close. I remember when Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne were playing at the same time, and the number of carries were pretty even when you look at how Billy Napier used the two backs. But certainly Jadan Baugh. I mean, one of the biggest plays of the year was the game sealer versus LSU last year, and it goes to the point that they were just talking about at the press conference there, Will, of he's not just big. He's not just strong. I didn't know he had that kind of breakaway speed in him in an SEC game when you're going to go try and put a game away. There goes Jadan Baugh down the sideline, and we're celebrating and we're all happy there in the swamp. But certainly, I think just a really good combo of backs. I don't care who starts. I don't care who gets more carries. Maybe situational is a guy better as a third down back than the other. Jacoby Jackson, Will, just going back to it last year. Now, Ball only had 4 receptions. Jackson only had 7. But Jackson goes 7 for 76 last year. 10.9 yards a reception. So I think that's going to be something you look for in these guys too. But look, running back's hardly any of our concerns with what Jabbar Luke's been able to do as a developer and as a running back coach with that group. I feel pretty good about these two backs. And whatever comes behind Florida, with Trayon Webb gets back, KD Daniels in the mix as well. But KD Daniels got that third roll back right now. But so excited for Ball in Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you asked about the PFF ratings. Ball was at 81.8, and Jackson was at 77.3 for last year. So we're talking about guys who were significantly better than ETN, right? I mean, there was a lot of consternation when ETN left the program and transferred to he who shan't be named up there in Athens. And you know, the reality is Florida didn't miss a beat. Like Florida had, and honestly, I think I mentioned last week that I had a conversation with a guy who does a Texas preseason magazine, and he specifically said the sources he'd talked to in Austin had cited Florida's offensive line as being one of the most physical that they'd faced all season long. Well, guess who's coming back this year, right? Is Florida's offensive line. And if you look at the stats from a couple of years ago for a guy like Montrell Johnson, and then last year, like Johnson had a better season last year on a per yard basis. There seemed to be, I mean, even though he was injured a lot of the time, that like there seemed to be more explosiveness out of Montrell Johnson. But in many ways, and I even remember this 2 years ago, that the point I made for ETN to be the starting running back over Montrell Johnson was ETN had more wiggle in the hole, and that the point of contact for the defenders was pretty close to the line of scrimmage, which meant you needed a guy who could make somebody miss a la Barry Sanders, as opposed to a guy who could get the extra 3 or 4 yards after he got hit, like an Emmitt Smith or something like that. And I think what you're going to see this year, given what everybody seems to say about Florida's offensive line, is that these guys are going to be able to get a running start. And so if you give guys like Jacoby Jackson and Jadan Baugh a running start, you're going to pop some big ones. And, you know, the reality is that there's been a lot of talk about DJ Lagway and what's he going to do against zone coverages and all that sort of stuff. But you know how you really deal with zone coverages? You run the ball right down the guy's throat, right? And if you put up 200 yards rushing and you can average 4 or 5, 6 yards a rush on a consistent basis, you're setting up Lagway for play action when they bring the safety up, right? And so, or even if you can just hold the safety because of the play action, even if
throw it behind the zone,
even if the coordinator has not, the defensive coordinator has not necessarily called for that safety to take a couple steps up, those guys creep up after a while, right? When you're able to run the ball. And I mean, you think about any of the, like I remember when Napier came to Gainesville, the discussion points were around his offense being very similar to Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, and that was really what they wanted to do, was that, you know, the whole point of having the zone blocking scheme was to have the running back be able to put his foot in the ground and go north-south, and then to be able to move sort of off of that center point, play action off of it, come back and be able to take deep shots and crossing routes off of the play action. And so these guys are critical to being able to set that up, being able to take, you know, 8-yard gains are nice, but if you can start to turn those 8-yard gains into 18-yard gains into 80-yard gains, obviously that really starts to take its toll and make a difference. And like I said, I recognize that Florida was bringing back a lot on the offensive line, and I recognize that Florida was bringing back a lot at the running back position in Baugh and Jackson, but I'm not sure I really recognized how much until I started talking to this guy Paul from Texas and some other folks I've sort of talked to since then, where I've asked them what they've thought about the Gators up front. And honestly, if you're talking about where confidence for the Florida program comes from, certainly a lot of that confidence comes from DJ Lagway, but I think a lot of the other confidence comes from, even if the defense does not turn into an elite unit, can you play ball control, right? Yeah. Can you get ahead on the road and still take it to the other team and not give them an opportunity to have the ball very much? And can you cash it in when you get in the red zone, right? I mean, honestly, if you look at the LSU versus Florida game last year, I mean, 93 plays, I've said it multiple times, and LSU only scored, 16 points? And a big reason for that was they just stalled every time they got inside Florida's territory. And Florida didn't. I mean, Lagway made the plays to get it in the end zone, but they also had a couple of plays where they were at, you know, the 1 or 2 yard line and just handed it off the ball, and bam, there it went into the end zone, right? So, and especially like if you look back at the Kentucky game, I mean, Lagway did a bunch of the work to get him down to the red zone, but Baugh then did the rest of the work to get him into the end zone. And so that combination, I think, becomes really dangerous. If you can move the pile in short yard situations, if the defense has to, on 3rd and 1, really respect your running back, well, now you've got an opportunity to pull it, and you've got an opportunity to take some deep shots down the field. And this, again, goes back to the thing I said right at the start when we were talking about the coaches, is how much confidence do you really have in your team? Because if you've got confidence in Jadan Baugh to get a yard, then 3rd and 1, you can play action because you can always come back to Baugh on 4th and 1 if you happen to miss it, right? And so, realistically, like extending drives to 4 downs becomes something these guys can do. Giving them the ball on 3rd and 4.
Yeah.
With confidence that they're going to get that first down so that the defense can't just sit there on a short little curl route or something like that and doesn't basically sit back in the zone and make Lagway pick them apart and those sorts of things where you make the defense be aggressive, make the defense come up, I think really does start to play a role. So I'm excited to see what these guys can do. Obviously, this is the one position where you look at it and say over a full 12, 13, 14 game season, typically running backs are going to get nicked a little bit over the course of a year. And so some of these guys who are backing these guys up are going to probably need to show something along the way for the season. But again, like you said, some of the guys that we're looking at are folks that we feel pretty comfortable being in there, guys like Katie Daniels and some of the other guys who've been brought in.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, we're all hoping for DJ Lagway to be healthy and have his full arsenal. But if he can run the ball, and there's some zone read elements in here too, with these backs, I mean, okay, good luck. I mean, if you want to play those backs, okay, I'll take my 230-pound quarterback and go around the edge. Or if you want to play that quarterback, I'm fine with it, with either one of these guys getting the hell off. So I think that's another element that I hope we get to see because of how good these guys are. And if those guys want to play Lagway, all right, fine. Jackson, Baugh, easy handoff to you, and you go do your business as well.
Well, so I'm not as sanguine as you are about the zone read with the quarterback coming around the edge. I would much rather see them incorporate triple option aspects of that, where you do the zone read and then chuck it out wide to somebody real quick with one of those weird underhand throws that Lagway is quite capable of making along the way. One of the things I had in the preseason magazine, I have an entire article talked about inserts. So it's an insert concept where essentially you sneak a guy out in between the tackle and the guard, and you get him on a linebacker, and it's something that has become really prevalent in pro football. So the Rams do it a ton, and it's become really prevalent. Like I actually went and found I was looking for this scheme specifically. Turns out Army uses it quite a bit, but the point is that you can isolate either your running back or the tight end on a linebacker if these guys can catch. So you mentioned 7 catches and 5 catches for Jackson and Baugh last year. Those are things that I think, well, 2 things. One is I think an increase in catches in general suggests that DJ Lagway is seeing the field much better because it means that when he needs to dump the ball off, he is rather than holding it.
And on that note, Montreal did have 13 catches last year. So.
Yeah. Well, and then the other part of it is that, I think there's going to be some opportunities to match these guys up on some linebackers, right? So that's the thing that sort of goes unnoticed when you talk about a running game. Like we talk about the safeties coming up, we talk about the deep shots, all that stuff. And that's all important and things that Fleur is going to do. But what it also does is it means you got to keep 3 linebackers in, right? Like if the defense is, or if the offense is able to dictate that they're able to run the ball for 5 yards a clip, you got to keep bigger players in there. And the minute you keep bigger players in there, now you have the opportunity to take these guys who you just mentioned are really fast and put them on a linebacker in coverage and get them out in open space. And so,
and how many defenses are built that way?
Well, for 3 linebackers?
Yeah,
none of them.
Exactly. So, granted, I know it is a kind of, you mentioned the Billy Napier conundrum in the preseason magazine. It is a conundrum about the offense. I mean, because we ask ourselves the question, look, I would love to go 4 or 5 wide with these receivers that Florida has recruited and the quarterback DJ Lagway at the same time. I'd also love to have the ability, going to your point, if you can, like I said, I want to be able to dictate a game. If Florida needs to go to your point, Will, and smash mouth and get the ball in the running back's hands in the passing game as well, where, as you said, defensives who don't really have 3 linebackers these days, not many defenses are built that way anymore, and you can go control a game that way, have the ability to do so. So I think with these type of backs in this offensive line, there could be some scenarios, especially if Lagway's still coming along and not fully healthy at the beginning of the year, but you still want him out there, of course. If you got to go win, if you got to go to Baton Rouge and win a game ugly, that might be how you go do it.
Yeah, I don't want to win that one ugly.
I don't either. I'm saying
let's go win.
If you have to.
Nah, let's just get Lagway healthy for that one. I don't care what you got to do the first 2 weeks. Look, those corn dog eating guys need to go down. We need to. I want to stomp LSU with every. I don't know. My general disdain for Nussmeyers has made this one matter more to me than I
don't know if you guys were around Gators Breakdown when it first started and Jim McElwain was head coach and Doug Nussmeier was OC. Go back into the archives because that's Will's point right there.
Yeah.
The Nussmeier disdain goes all the way back to 2016, 2017.
As it should for anyone who had to watch those offenses. But the funny thing is that I would have no problem saying that Garrett Nussmeier is good if in fact he was hitting the benchmarks that are critical to that. But he's not. And so now I want to like I think there's an opportunity to bury what people think is a very, very good LSU team and to do it real early in the year. And you're right. I think Baugh and Jackson are going to be a big part of that. I think, LSU is going to come into that game and they're going to want to put a bunch of pressure on Lagway and they're going to want to take away some of the stuff he wants to do deep. And they're going to play a bunch of zone to see what he can do. And the question is going to be, how are you going to get him out of it? Or, are you going to struggle the entire game because you can't get him out of it? And Baugh and Jackson are going to be a big part of that. So, whether you got to win one ugly or those sorts of things, I don't necessarily know. I think the big thing is that if you can dictate in the running game what the defense has to do, then you open up Lagway to do all the things he's already shown us that he's just magical at doing, right? Like the deep shot to Tank Hawkins, who I think is going to be the guy who takes a step forward this year. I think he's going to be the guy who takes that step based on the speed we've seen already and based on sort of some profiles. I looked up what receivers who come in and sort of these were high ranked receivers, I think like top 50 or top 100, and what they do in their freshman year if they're going to take a leap. And it turns out that you have to pass like the 10 catch mark as a freshman in order to really take that leap. That just seems to be a very magical mark that if you come in and you can sort of contribute a little bit to start with. And Hawkins hit that mark last year. And so I'm expecting him to take a pretty significant leap. And that guy with that speed running deep after everybody's crept up because Florida's been run. And oh crap, here's the play action. And there he goes. And you got it. So I'm looking so that everybody can tweet at me if Tank Hawkins gets a deep one against LSU, because that's my prediction, man. This game gets blown open on a deep throw to Hawkins to blow that one open.
I'm going to remember that. Monday, August 18th, 9:50 p.m. Will called it.
Hey, there we go, man. That'll be pretty cool if it actually happens.
Hey, talking about calling things, we're going to call our shots next week, Will. I've already had people asking, hey, when's the over-under episode? It is one of our popular episodes that we put out every year, the Monday before the first game. So we'll have Billy Napier's opening, season opening game week press conference next Monday. And then we will do our ever so popular over-under prediction episode. So it's always fun, Will. So we get together next week. It'll be game week.
I am so excited that it's going to be game week. I'm less excited to do the over-unders given the way I have performed over the last couple of years. But if nothing else, it gives everybody the ability to come after me a little bit. And that's always fun too. So I look forward to it, my friend. And it's not quite time to open up the gifts. Yeah. But we're getting awfully close.
This weekend is Christmas Eve. We get a ranked matchup in Ireland. Kansas State, Iowa State open up in Ireland. So that's I think number 17 versus number 22.
Well, and then we get Texas and Ohio State in a game that doesn't matter because no matter who loses, they're all making the playoff.
Yeah. So I put that out today too. Yep. No. Still exciting, but yeah, it's like there's no stakes. There's no stakes in the matchup, really.
Well, I mean, honestly, you can say that about a lot of the stuff.
I know.
We're all diehards. We're going to watch the Florida games no matter what.
One of those teams could not make it, but
well, that does kind of. I will say it does make it a little bit fun when a team hits that fourth loss, And then you're like, everything fell apart. It's not just like, it's so easy to get to that spot, and you weren't able to do it with the kind of recruiting you have.
Yeah.
Like, there has been quite a bit of joy in the Florida State collapse over the last couple of years. So, it's a different flavor for college football now, but it's still opening up the gifts from Santa. The problem is that we don't get to play with them for a couple of weeks, right? I mean, you get Long Island and USF, and then finally you've opened them up. You get to see them for a couple of weeks. You finally get to play with them there in September. So
LIU, like I was talking about this last night. It's the first game of the season, so you're just excited because it's football and your team's playing. Second week, USF, not a cupcake, but you should take care of business. It should, you shouldn't be scared in the fourth quarter in that game. If everything is going okay, but then, like you said, it's just kind of an appetizer until week 3.
Well, put it this way: when I was a true freshman, when I was a freshman at Florida, I came to campus and learned my limits in terms of beverage consumption for the first couple of games of the year. And those games, it didn't matter whether I knew what had, I was not paying attention to cover 2 versus cover 3 and those sorts of things. Put it that way. I was in no condition to diagnose coverages at that point as I was doing that. By the time week 3 came around, I'd at least kind of figured out my limits. So the freshmen at Florida this year have a great advantage. Though maybe the freshmen last year had a great advantage because I don't remember the Miami game, but there's a great advantage to the preparation for all. So, ease into the tailgate, ease into the season, get ready for Baton Rouge, and for what's to come later in the year.
Well, if they're going to Harmonic Woods, there's no easing into that tailgate. So,
like I said, you got to learn your limits. At some point, you got to say no. Other people aren't going to do it when you go off to college.
All right, good stuff. All right, well, man, hey, good stuff. Lots to get into, and we got into it, and. Like I said, next week it's here. So this was the last one we kind of had to get creative on, but it's here. Next week we are full steam ahead.
It's go time, buddy. Can't wait.
All right, everybody. Will Miles at readandreaction.com. Catch his work there. Him and Nick Knudsen. I'm David Waters, host of Gators Breakdown. Follow me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for catching us on this episode of Gators Breakdown.